What is it like living with an alter? For myself, it hasn't really been a problem. Even before meeting other people who had alters, it was never something that I was so worried about I had to go out and do something about it. It was just sort of, it was something that I accepted and lived with and integrated into who I was. It makes things both less predictable and in some cases more predictable. Less predictable in the sense that anytime I go out to do something, I sort of have these other parts of myself that can sort of chip in when I'll go to do an activity. So there's a lot more pre-thought before I do any decision. Even if it's something that seems like it's on the fly, there's a lot that's going on in my head that is sort of defining how I'm going to go about it. But it's less difficult, I would say, because I never have to worry about not thinking things through. And they're not something where, oh, I'll just slip in and out. And if I do slip into it, it's something I already know. I already know what's going to come from it. I know how I'm going to react to things because of it. So it makes things less predictable and more predictable in a way. How do they take over and sort of rule my life, I guess? It's very interesting because in a way they don't so much take over as sort of I let them in, at least with the submissive and apathy. Since Daedric and David are sort of constantly there's no real way to tell exactly when they sort of switch over. One minute I might be David and the next Daedric might have stepped in without myself or anyone else sort of knowing, unless you really get to know me and you can tell the differences. And if I'm paying attention, I can sort of catch the subtle shifting between David, who might crack a really witty joke, and then Daedric, who will sit silent for 5 minutes, just watching everyone and taking things in and sort of waiting for the opportunity to step back in. But with apathy, it was a very different situation. What happens with apathy is if I get so overwhelmed and just things are coming at me from all sides, I'm basically faced with a choice. I can either completely flip out right now, or I can sort of let David and Daedric step to the side and deal with their own things, and then apathy just sort of slips in. And then apathy will go about his way until either Daedric or David, or both of them, ideally, have figured out whatever needs to be figured out. And so even when apathy takes over, the other ones are still there, still thinking through things, and still have just as much control, could easily step in if they wanted to. They just don't. And it's the same with the submissive, who is very subtle and sort of, if I'm trying to converse with someone and I start to realize I've got to pick and choose what I'm going to say and I have to be very careful about what I'm doing here, sort of the submissive will wheedle his way in and sort of start giving suggestions, and then if need be, he'll just sort of take over as the other two step aside and say, you know what you're doing here, so go and do what it is that needs to be done. Do I believe it could be my imagination or a mental disorder? I don't believe it. I certainly recognize, though, that it could be. And I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I talk to myself and I have these different personalities, but I'm also perfectly sane. I mean, I could certainly make the claim, but unfortunately that's not something that I can sort of defend, because I'm, of course, trapped within myself. I only have my perspective to look to. So if society as a general says that it's a problem, I can't really stop them from saying it is. For me personally, though, it's never been something where it has impeded my life in any way or sort of caused problems or anything like that. If it did cause problems, I would definitely seek out a therapist, because that's something I believe in and think can greatly benefit people. But for myself, I don't find that it's something I need to fix. It's not something that makes me any less of a person. In fact, I think it makes me more of who I am. And if it's a figment of my imagination, well, I just attribute that to the creativity of my imagination. And if that's the case, then I'll just let my imagination continue running wild. I guess one thing that I'd like to say that sort of isn't covered is, you know, the wide variety of altars that are out there, and the wide variety of both people that have altars and the wide variety of altars that they have. In defining it, and it's the danger of trying to define anything, it sort of makes it seem like it's this very one-sided thing, as if there's only, you know, there's only altars and they're only going to be this way. Whereas from what I've found, altars not only reflect the people that they manifest in, but then the people themselves react to their altars very differently. And it's as complicated as sort of any sort of emotional, emotional emotion, for lack of a better term. It's not something that's easily defined, and it's not something that you know, you can look at someone and immediately say, oh, that person has an altar. You know, even someone, if you see them talking to yourself, that doesn't necessarily mean they have an altar. It might just be that they are indeed talking only to themselves, and there's no second side of that conversation. Any advice for people going through the same thing? The biggest advice I would have is, you know, don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid to embrace it. It's not, there's not something wrong with your brain. It's not that you've got some terrible disorder that's going to plague you. You know, a lot of people out there have altars, and a lot of people out there are accepting of people with altars. And if you find that it really is something that you're having problems with, then by all means, you know, go out and see a therapist or see your doctor. Or, you know, if it's something that is being detrimental to you, then by all means, you need to go out and try to fix it. I wouldn't say that it's something that needs to be fixed, but if that's something that you believe, then by all means, that's what you should do. Me personally, I would say go out and try to get to know your altars. You know, start up conversations with them. Don't be afraid to approach them. Don't be afraid to ask them for advice, because you might be surprised what they have to say and sort of what they can help you learn about yourself in the long run.